India. To a lot of people, all they're familiar with is one person, Mahatma Gandhi. Well, that's not enough as far as our next guest's concerned. Not enough to understand either the nation of India's past or its present. Arundhati Roy is the author of, among other things, The God of Small Things. She's written a new introduction to an 80-year-old book, Annihilation of Caste by B.R. Ambedkar. Here to talk about the new book and the case it makes against the mythology around Gandhi, Arundhati Roy. Arundhati, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Laura.
Let's start with the text. It's been said that Annihilation of Caste is the most widely read and also the most obscure text in India. What's meant by that?
Well, the book that you're holding in your hands right now, it's an introduction. I mean, it's actually the text of an 80-year-old speech that was never delivered by Dr. Ambedkar, who in India is, a very, very beloved man amongst particularly amongst the Dalits, who were formerly known as the Untouchables. And it was a speech that he was supposed to give in 1936, and the organization, which is a sort of privileged caste Hindu reformer outfit, who were at the time proselytizing amongst the Dalits, the Untouchables, of course the opposite of the Hollywood meaning of untouchable, and trying to prevent them from converting to other religions, to escape the scourge of caste. But it was a very political game that was going on at the time, and they asked Ambedkar to give the text of the speech in advance, and they saw that he was going to use that platform to indict Hinduism in a very scholarly, erudite way, to indict Hinduism and to exhort untouchables, I use that word because he uses it, to convert to other religions. And so they just disinvited him. And this text he published himself in 1936. But subsequently, it's the most read because Dalit presses have reproduced it. The Maharashtra government, initially claimed that it has all the rights to Ambedkar's work, but you can't buy it in a normal bookshop. It's a kind of underground classic, and it shows how there is a kind of lack of communication, a complete breakdown of communication between the privileged caste of India and the others. So even the books don't, and he actually had written it to address a privileged caste audience, and they have kind of invisibilized it.
You talk about the invisibilizing of even the debates that took place at that time between Ambedkar and Gandhi. The whole book is not about that, but your introduction touches on it. Can you, for our US audience, just kind of summarize briefly, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the kind of mythology around Mahatma Gandhi?
Well, actually, when Ambedkar published Annihilation of Caste, he said that he wasn't even, he just considered the Hindu right wing beyond the pale, the kind of people who are in power in India today. So his debate was with those who considered themselves moderate Hindus, and he said that a religion that whose sacred texts sanctified the idea of caste, sanctified this kind of hierarchy, sanctified the idea that at the time 44 million and today 100 million people could be considered polluting and impure. He denounced that religion. He said you cannot be moderate and believe in those texts. And the person who the world believes to be the greatest living Hindu, Mahatma Gandhi, replied, and then Ambedkar replied to that reply, and all that is contained in this book. So when I started to write the introduction, I started looking at this debate. And I just began to get really puzzled about the thing. Gandhi was saying that caste is the most genius thing, and it was the best part of Hinduism. And, of course, the world thinks that he fought against caste.
Right.
But he what he did was he supported caste, but he fought against the idea of untouchability, which was the performative end of caste.
So you could keep the structure without the
Yeah,
behavior?
exactly. That he didn't question entitlement. He believed that because caste is essentially about entitlement and about ancestral occupation. That, you know, a person whose caste says that they should be, you know, what Gandhi kept calling scavengers, whose job it is to carry human excreta on their heads, should remain that, should think of it as a divine privilege. And today's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has echoed those words almost exactly.
You describe a very complicated relationship, maybe not so complicated, between his theories around caste and his theories around race and his orientation towards the racial apartheid system in South Africa. This is stuff that most Americans for sure don't know.
It will be distressing for people in the black community who have been taught to valorize him, and people on the American left who keep invoking him. But the fact is that all of us, including me, we were taught that, you know, Gandhi's political awakening happened when he was thrown out of this whites-only compartment in South Africa.
On the train.
On the train. And in fact, Gandhi believed in racial segregation. His first victory in South Africa was to campaign for a third entrance to be opened in the Durban post office, so Indians would not have to use the same entrance as Kafirs. And all my analysis, by the way, is not my analysis. I've just reproduced his own writings and his own, so there's no interpretation going on here. And he calls them savages and Kafirs. And of course people say, but he changed, but he did not change, you know. Only, I mean, he partnered with the British in the Boer War to tighten imperialism in South Africa. He partnered with the British in the very, very brutal put down of the Zulu uprising.
He served in the military.
He served. He in prison when he was campaigning later. Even his entire life in South Africa, at least 99% of it, was not even campaigning for the rights of the Indian indentured labor who were of the lower caste or the subordinated castes. He was campaigning for the rights of Indian businessmen to be allowed into the Transvaal to compete with British trade.
You refer to him as the saint of the status quo. Where did his saintly reputation come from, and why is this important to take on now? I mean, you've taken on a lot of controversial topics in your life. Did you need to take on Gandhi?
I mean, I really think, how can you know these things and then allow the idea of, in a way, the idea of India, and in a way he's known as I suppose he's the most saintly modern person, you know, invoked all the time, and when you see this, is there a good time or a bad time to do it, you know? But the point is that what I am talking about is the fact that caste in India, which, I mean, unlike race, unlike apartheid, unlike sexism, unlike economic imperialism, perhaps we haven't won these battles, but certainly they've come under international scrutiny.
We talk about
Whereas caste, where, you know, today, you know, in 2012 there was all the protests which the world paid attention to. Good, there was a protest about the rape of the gang rape and murder of the girl in the bus in Delhi. But that year, 1,500 Dalit women were raped by upper caste men. That year, 651 Dalits were murdered. You know, many of them lynched. They are still made to eat shit. They are still not allowed, you know, into the space of the so-called privileged castes. So caste has not gone away. It's just that people associated with Gandhi and yoga and vegetarianism, and underneath that, you know, even the Indian liberal left-leaning intellectuals have invisibilized it. And there has been a very distressing misrepresentation of history by the court historians, you know, and it is a scandal that's basically hidden in plain sight.
You talk about Gandhi's own programs as having disabled, debilitated millions of political imaginations with this bar of purity set so high. Can you talk about that a little
low,
bit?
Actually.
Okay, well,
I mean, I
talk
think
about
it's
that a little.
Well, look, when Gandhi was developing the idea of satyagraha, the soul force as it's known, and when he was, shedding his Western suit and putting on the loincloth and eating goat's cheese and all of that, he wasn't actually, the battles were not for the indentured labor or against colonialism. As I said, the battle was to allow Indian business to expand their, Indian traders to expand their home range, But what I say is that you cannot simulate poverty. Yeah. Poverty is not about having no money alone. It's about having no power, and he was accumulating power. But look at, everyone knows, I mean, because of the Richard Attenborough film, if nothing else, about Gandhi's Salt March, which was a brilliant piece of political strategy. It was a piece of political theater. It was real mass politics. It was against the salt laws and so on. But 3 years before that, Ambedkar led what was known as the Mahad Satyagraha, where thousands of untouchables marched through the town of Mahad, going militantly to drink from the public water tank where they had been denied all these centuries, They were beaten and scattered by the privileged castes, and Gandhi never supported that. And the Brahmins pured the tank by pouring cow dung into it, So when we talk about political mass action, first of all, we have to be clear about the radicalness of it.
Yeah.
I mean, what I talk about in this book is how the story of the conflict between Gandhi and Ambedkar actually complicates our understanding of imperialism and what it meant. For Gandhi, it was easy to do this rhetoric of, I believe in the people and I don't believe in the state, and the people are moral. And Ambedkar was in a wild panic about the fact that if the British left, the state would be in the hands of the privileged caste Hindus, and there would be no safeguards, So he crossed the line and he lobbied hard to become part of the drafting committee of the Constitution to put in some safeguards. He's very nimble in this way, very brilliant. He did, that does mean he left a confused legacy.
Ambedkar was ahead of his time on many, many things, and I'm thrilled that this book is getting new attention thanks to your introduction and the republication. You mentioned that he believed that the heart of caste was in the control of women. And as people talk about violence against women and the mobilization in India and worldwide against it, I'd love you to talk about that a little if you could.
Ambedkar, as I sort of briefly mentioned earlier, he tried to maneuver himself somehow into drafting or being on the drafting committee of the Constitution. And then, he was a very brilliant man. He studied in Columbia, and so he eventually, despite his quarrels with the Congress party, he became India's first law minister. And he tried to draft a Hindu code bill in which women were given the right to inheritance, to divorce. He believed that, as you said, the control of women was the key to perpetuating the caste system. But the parliament was surrounded by sadhus and the Hindu right, and he was forced to recede. He actually resigned in disgust. And it's such a strange thing, that Gandhi should be revered by feminists. If you look at the things Gandhi said and did about women, it is beyond shocking.
Sleeping with his niece in his 70s?
And much, much more than that, and so regressive, and yet he is valorized. And Ambedkar, of course, is unheard of by people outside of India, and these things about him, even in India, people are not aware of.
You finally are, I believe, working on another novel after
Yes.
the tremendous success of God of Small Things. Is there anything you can tell us about that?
No. No. Just that I hope, that I'll be. I actually am so so keen to make the space around myself to finish it, because it's giving me a great deal of pleasure.
Good. Well, you deserve
And
some pleasure.
and understand. No, not that this doesn't. But I mean, it's just sometimes I feel like a sedimentary rock. Like I've had so many layers and layers and layers of, writing this kind of stuff for 15 years now, and a novel isn't about that. It's not a manifesto, but I feel like it's all. I myself am curious about what I will write and how this experience will play out.
I'm curious too, and I'm sure our viewers are too. Arundhati, as